Aloha. With this video, I wanted to dive into the introduction to the macro, specifically dealing with the idea of love and relationships, coming from the perspective of mostly how we have this baseline definition of what love is, just like we have this baseline definition of what humanity is. The same way we have this baseline definition of what space is, and just these very generic terms that are given to us by the people that have spoken this language and lived in this reality before us. There's a lot of different things that are involved in this discussion, but I wanted to at least open the door because a lot of the discussions surrounding this issue never really go into this issue. So like a microcosm of the macrocosm within relationships and love would be an example of that would be the mainstream discussion is in relationships and love dealing with the political scene. The closest a lot of people in like the conscious community or truther circles get is like the swirling discussion. So there's more to the swirl discussion than black people mixing with white people, because you can see how that's like, you know, an old school or some kind of emotionally based individual will look into that, and because there's a logic, there's a knowledge, there's a way of approaching things that is limited to the logic-based, knowledge-based thinking that is approved by the system. So we have approved by the system ways of thinking and being that are, you can see like politically correct. That's a good example of like love today. So you can understand how politically correct is this invention that was designed to control people in many different ways. But you can see how it's a way of thinking. It's an invention of a way of thinking that is designed to keep the system of power, the establishment of power, in power by distracting the masses with mid-level streams of consciousness. So it keeps you in line by making you feel guilty, by making you feel like you're wrong, like you don't fit in, like all these different things that political correctness has created. You can take it a step even further into like this liberalism sort of mentality that's going on with the Democrats and the push. You can see that, take it a step even further. They're pushing the women's rights agenda out there, and you can see how that people who know about previous revolutions and protests and all that other stuff, you have even the slightest bit of understanding about what's going on in the nation and around the world, you understand that any kind of pushback or revolution that's coming about from the people is going to have a controlled opposition that is designed to manipulate that thought process somewhere else. The same way political correctness manipulates your thought process somewhere else. So this is the same way love and relationships, that floaty and the word humanity, it directs your energy somewhere else. So emotion-based knowledge or logic has the same effect on us as as political correctness. Like the term political correctness is political correct. Is it politically correct to genocide in entire peoples and then act like that history doesn't exist and they don't matter, and to call them primitive and savage, is that politically correct? See, that's taboo to even have that discussion. And because the establishment has made that taboo to even have that discussion, people who talk about that information are themselves taboo. Like their talking points don't matter anymore. So this is how terms like political correctness, humanity, and all this loosely thrown out emotion-based definition stuff gets thrown out there. Like that stuff is designed to control you and manipulate the dialogue, manipulate the discussion. So as long as you are not diving into the macro storyline, you won't be able to see how the system is actually affecting you, because what the system is throwing at you is easy to see for the most part if you know what to look for. Who's throwing it is even easier. So you got the who, like level 1 consciousness, the who, the what, and then you have the how. So how it's getting thrown at you is when you start getting into the discussion of the macro. And then how, and then why these things existing is when you take it a step even further into the macro. It's encompassing the how, the what, and the who. And then you include the why, then you're getting into a macro discussion. So you can slice it up however you want and focus on one part from any one time. But if you are talking about one of the perspectives and not really going into the macro as a whole, then you're just using the macro for the micro. You're not really you're not really addressing the macro. This is what I'm seeing a lot of people that are doing on the internet, because it's easy that way. It's easy to jump on the ball of some kind of discussion and then, pick up a bunch of, actual subscribers or fake subscribers, because the controlled opposition wants to maintain the dialogue. So YouTube is the perfect replacement for controlling the information that was coming through from the TV. So the Hollywood and television and all that stuff is dying, and the mainstream media is dying. So what will the system use to maintain control over the masses? Well, they have to go through social media. They have to shrink the story down to these quick little tweets, these quick little late night talk show interviews with celebrities and politicians. They have to shrink it down to a Facebook post. They have to shrink it down to a meme. They have to shrink it down to an Instagram post. Like, everything has to be shrunken down, and you have to see that this is on purpose. So another example of the micro-macro discussion could be, you have the majority of the mainstreamers in the truther circles discussing and arguing about information that's put over the internet, that's put over social media, that's put through Twitter and Reddit and Facebook and all these other, in the politics and all that other stuff. But you don't have masses of people talking about how those systems work. You don't have masses of people talking about the way social media was put together as a whole to design to control the masses, the same way definitions like politically correct, love, humanity, and so on create this emotional tether to basically nothing. The same way that people who are in love, still in love with the space program and the heliocentric universe, they defend it, like, because they have an emotional attachment to it. It's a belief system, and this is why you start talking about flattened globe. People automatically say, I still believe we live on a globe. And you're like, okay, well, do you want to go into the discussion of belief? Do you want to go into so belief is another word, another floaty, empty word, like love and all that other stuff. So before I go off onto other tangents, let me just stick on the on the love discussion for a little bit, because that has some real solid points to expand upon what I'm talking about. So I'm finally moved back to the Bay right now, at least for a little bit right now, back into Oakland, to take care of some things. And on the way back here, as I was moving, we passed this billboard on the road that said, it was one of those, you know, when you're going through the heart of the country, when you're driving, you know, out in the middle of nowhere, you see these big billboards that are for like churches or Christianity and stuff like that. In between all the truck stops and the gas stops and that's pretty much all it is. You see a lot of the same way on the road. You see a lot, or in the radio, if you don't have any service, you have church radio stations, like Christian church radio stations that go from one town to the next. So you're either hearing Christian music or Christian discussion, so on and so forth. So what happens is, this goes into the discussion of love. So this is not going to be like one of those things that, I'm not even going to explain. I'm just going to go in. So one of the main billboards was, or one of the things that caught my eye that kind of triggered this video, was the billboard of a baby's face and a quote next to that baby's face that says, let's say, there is evidence of life, or here's your evidence for life. And it was just a baby, just a plain old baby, a white baby, to be more accurate. And that was it. And it was just like, here's your evidence for, do you need evidence for life, or evidence for life, or whatever that is. And that's the discussion. So the discussion between scientists and people who are religious, which is the mainstream discussion that's out there, and they say that's it. There's nothing else. There's no more. It's just life versus science. Like, and then who's gonna defend that? It's like life and science. Like, where do we fit in? Where's our discussion? Oh, you shut the fuck up. Like, you're not a part of this discussion. You can't talk about life. You're not qualified to talk about life. Only religion is qualified to talk about life. They've been here for hundreds and hundreds of years, you know, talking. This is the religion. This is our spiritual nature of the whole nation, Christianity. So Christians are the only ones who get to talk about what life is and what, you know, our spiritual nature is. So this is how the controlled opposition of religion through the government controls the information put out by the people. So the people can't even talk about our definitions and interpretations of spirituality and of life in that whole discussion, because the late night talk show hosts of consciousness have already put that politically correct bullshit out into the atmosphere to where you can't even fucking do anything. You can't say anything. Why? Because the discussion has already been made and completed. It's between religion and scientists. Those two are equal, and so what that does is that puts the religions on God status, and that puts the scientists on God status, because they both have equal approaches in your life to what's going on. And you can't do anything about it. Why? Because those assholes who are giving them the platform of religion versus science, they control the platform that these people are on. They control like when they can speak, when their information is valid, when their information can be expanded upon, when it needs to be suppressed, like everything like that. So that's the macro. So you have mainstreamers and even truthers getting, you know, into the discussions of belief systems with, you know, science and religion, but you're not really looking at the stage that has been set. The stage that has been set by the the MCs, by the people behind the scenes. So this is why I'm talking about the macro. This is what we have to challenge ourselves to do, because that's when you're starting getting into the deeper definitions of who and what you are, the deeper definitions of what's going on here. And those are the spaces of which you're going to be able to empower yourself to where you're not subjected to the bullshit within the micro storylines. The same thing with like relationships. That easily transfers over to relationships, to where you can see, you say you're in a relationship, say you're heavily, for example purposes, because this is for people who are watching this video, it's not that many people who are really gonna see where I'm coming from to the umpteenth degree. But for example purposes, let's say you understand the macro for the most part. Let's say you're in a relationship with somebody who's heavily like into mainstream music and, you know, all that other stuff, and let's say that they have a baby and you're with them. Like how you're getting ready to be that baby's father, and they're teaching their baby a lot of that garbage that comes from the system, whether it's consciously and subconsciously. So that represents like a micro consciousness that individual, that parent, that being that's supposed to be protecting this child, is installing these destructive systems into this child. You're in this relationship, and you know, like for example purposes, that's her child. So what do you, like, where do you stand? If that's the belief system, if that's the choices that are being made, and those choices are, it's either this or you could leave a sort of scenario, then you can see, well, these are two universes that are not compatible, obviously, because like you are looking at the world that individual is installing to the next generation, and that's a micro world that they're installing into not only their micro universe but their macro universe. So this is how the micro universe becomes the macro universe and the micro universe when children get older. And when the children get older, they become adults, and then they do it to their children. So this is why it's so easy and so kind of under the radar, where it's really important to focus on the macro. But it doesn't really seem important because a lot of people seem hopeless, and then a lot of people can't really put the pieces together to see how far back this goes. So this is why I'm saying, like, the hardest thing to do is to change yourself, to grow and change yourself. So the mechanism for change needs to be focused externally. So this is why the New Age is also always about like saying that, oh yeah, fix the self, fix the self, fix the self, but it is void of the connection to everybody else. But it says everybody else is one, so it's just connected to everybody else by saying, by phrases. It doesn't really go into the macro depths of what our connections really are. It leaves it in this floaty definition of, you know, we're all consciousness, we're all one, we're all connected to the all, we're all one this and one that. But it stops there. It stops at the introduction to something. And then it says, oh yeah, well, the something is up to you. Well, the something is up to us, and the something has also been discovered and broken down by our ancestors in many different ways. So what is that something? What are those some things? We won't know if we keep giving our our time away to these distractions. So back to the billboard. That billboard said, evidence of God. Here's a baby picture. So you can see how weak that is. The religious, so let's take it to as far as I can go, worshiping this realm. So what if this realm, I can't even say what if this realm. You know that this realm is not the extent of what your soul represents. This realm is, this realm is not the end all be all of your energetic potentiality. Let me say that again. This realm is not the end-all be-all of your energetic potentiality. You continue to grow. This place is a challenge to make sure that you don't remain stagnant. And in that challenge, if you do remain stagnant, you won't have a life. Like, you won't have a life worth living for the most part, because your energy is not moving. There's nothing, you're not learning there, so you have no meaning, you have no purpose. And when you have no meaning and no purpose, you can be turned into a slave. You can be turned into something that is subjected to somebody else's magic. So the magic that I'm saying that we've been underneath is the magic of the micro consciousness and the controlled opposition and all this other stuff that separates us from the macro interpretation. Because this is the thing, once you get into the macro interpretation of what's going on, it kind of forces you to get into the macro interpretations of who and what you are. It doesn't kind of force you, it definitely forces you. This is why the macro storyline is so taboo and not really looked upon, because the micro stories are so easy. There's no responsibility in talking about like Nipsey Hussle. There's no personal responsibility there. Like you there's no personal responsibility of talking about 9/11. There's no personal responsibility there. Like, really, when you get really down to it, unless you're tying it into the macro, the personal responsibility is left for whatever, because what is meaning to be focused on is what? It's the micro storyline. So it's meant to bring about a bunch of emotions to get you on the side of what's going on. It's like, yeah, right, I feel that makes a lot of sense. So things that make sense have taken precedence over things that make power. So and this is a thing that it's a stepping stone. Like, before you make power, you have to make sense. But the system is designed to distract you from making sense in order to maintain its own power. So this is why chaos is such a benefit to the system, and any kind of knowledge of what's going on is going to be, on the macro scale, is going to be suppressed and, you know, taken out in so many ways. So one of the ways that that's going to be taken out is to focus all of your creative energies on what? Just reproducing robots, slaves, physical matter in the form of a body that is no longer a soul anymore, but now has been convinced psychologically, spiritually, and physically to think that it's only it's only the body. It's not even the mind, and it's sure as hell, and it can't even comprehend the soul. It doesn't even know what the soul exists. It's just this empty nothing shot out of a big bang, and, you know, realize that there's a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus out there that is the Son of God that's protecting you from everything. That's all you need to do to get out of this realm safely, and you got God on your side. Is it really that easy? Is it really that simple? No. So why does that exist? How does that exist? So this evidence of God billboard is is what a lot of these truthers are protecting. There's billboards, there's radio stations, there's movie, it's in the Hollywood, like all this shit. This is how that I still don't see how a lot of people who are really in that religious scene, specifically the Christianity circles, can't or will not go into disassembling how Christianity in particular has been used as a weapon against the people. I can't see that. I mean, I can see it. It's obvious, but it's at this day in the game, at this time, I don't know. It's not really confusing. I'm not really surprised. I guess I am a little shocked. I'm a little shocked at times when it comes down to that, because you know, it's a lot of smart people on the internet. It's a lot of real smart, intelligent people out there. But belief is a bitch. Emotions are a bitch. Like, so that shit takes over everything. And I'm not saying like don't have emotion and don't go into, you know, don't feel anything. In fact, good. This is a good segue to what I'm talking about. The depths of the macro is actually a deeper feeling. It's a deeper connection. It's a deeper relationship. This is the actual point of why I'm having these discussions and making these videos, because going back to the swirling and all that other stuff, you can see how that, like I said, that discussion is focused on the, for the most part, when people talk about that, they're not really talking about the systematic oppression of a particular people. They're really talking about like their feelings, like, oh, this feels right, like we're all one, so race doesn't matter. So you can see how, you know, people get sensitive and then they immediately start resorting to their emotions, because the system has resorted to its emotions. The system has, in order to play this is what politically correctness is. It's an emotion-based system of thinking that is designed to protect the logic of the establishment. It's an emotion-based system that is designed to protect the logic of this establishment. That's what's going on here. Political correctness, so on and so forth. So this is why you have so many empty definitions. You don't know what love is. You don't know what truth is. You don't know what humanity is. We don't know, you know, what we are. We have all these, and this is how you can have billboards that say, oh, well, your evidence of God is just to have a baby. That's it. Just pop a fucking baby out, and then boom, there's your evidence of God. And then they got you by the balls. You just come back, come back to the church and keep pumping out these babies who are just gonna fall for that billboard over and over and over again. And you're like, oh my God. So what that evidence of God billboard does is it creates this sense of pride. Oh, they're like, I am now, you know, a representative of God. I, you know, put my dick in their vagina and we created a baby. And now we are gods. And if anything, at worst, we are king and queen. And we are the kings and queen that represent the godly nature that has come through my sperm into her vagina, and now we have completed our ceremony for this experience. Is that it? So this is how your religions are all based on sex. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong in that, especially in Christianity, when you have all that pederast shit going on, all that pedophilia and all that rape and all the shit that's going on in the Catholic Church. What are their real intentions here? If they are hiding babies and raping babies and kidnapping babies and not telling you about it, and they're doing it en masse, and they've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years, and they're only putting out the appearance to look godly, what are they actually doing? Are they actually acting like being what they're saying? No, they're the opposite. So why isn't that being attacked? Well, that's not being attacked because that is woven into. This is the main reason why people aren't going at the church, because the same reason people aren't going at the church is the same reason people are not going at the white-sponsored America. People are not going at the colonial-based power grid around the world, because it's based in who and what they are. They still love that shit. So subconsciously, a lot of people are talking about this distractive ass information because they know at heart eventually this discussion between the indigenous people and the empires of the world, which is just one empire of the world, the indigenous people, that discussion is going to be made. So the distractive stories that come out with all your celebrities, celebrity deaths, celebrity the convictions, like all the people are getting money trouble, all the people are getting in legal problems. All of that is a micro distraction to keep you away from having those macro conversations. So it has to go into your belief systems, your definitions of your belief system. It's not just your belief systems, it's the words that make up your belief systems. That's the macro. So this evidence of God shit that comes down is coming down from the establishment, obviously. But why? Because as long as you keep reproducing in this system, you will keep reproducing robots of that level of consciousness, of that evidence of God billboard consciousness that is perfectly aligned with the slave mentality that has been installed within us, within generations before us. So this is how you can have all these lies that are going up around the world, and then a lot of people not even knowing about it. You say, so people are so linear. You say something like that when you say, oh, well, just the same way like heliocentrism. So are all the priests in on the lie? Or all the see people are emotional, so they can't really go into what you're really talking about. They're automatically like a child. So what do you mean? They can't really be like, let me think about that for a little bit. I never really thought about it from that. Automatically, well, what about this? So they don't even comprehend. They can't even see or hear what you're saying because people are still children at heart. And the mainstream, that's the mainstream response. When you see people, when people do that, they're copycatting what the newscasters do. What happens when the religious person talks to the newscaster on CNN? They get into, well, what about this? What about that? Same thing happens on late night talk shows and all that other stuff. It's pushing out a childish atmosphere. So let's get back to the relationships discussion. So you can see how a love of each other, like, let's keep it in the religious talk for a little bit before we go into that, because love of like the Most High, it's the same as like the love of, once you get into the macros, the same with love of like yourself and the love of like your loved one, like that connection, and then that connection creates, you can potentially create another like a baby who also is enveloped in that love, and awareness is a better word. Awareness can be in my word book. Awareness is interchangeable with love. Let me say that again. Awareness, the word awareness is interchangeable with the word love, because an awareness is, in order to have a deep love, you have to have a deep awareness of yourself. In order to have a deep awareness of somebody else, you have to have a deep awareness of yourself and of that individual. That's true love. What's going on here in this floaty bullshit is just emotion-based love. And children are emotional. Children are the ones that are limited to their emotions. So the mainstream media is out there, and Hollywood is out there to push an emotion-based consciousness onto the people without telling them that it's largely emotional. So they say it's not emotional. We're not emotional. We're right. See, when they say that when they push an emotional-based discussion out there, and it's clearly emotional. Look at all the religious people and all the newscasters and politicians, the way they respond, even in social media. When they push emotion-based and then they have that stature, they're not. But this is not emotion. I'm just sharing information in an emotion-based field because I'm right. That's it. That's all they're saying. And then they say, oh yeah, I don't have to explain myself also because I'm right and you're just wrong. That's it. On to the next show. So that awareness of that in relationships is largely non-existent. you don't have the awareness of the self. So you're already starting on, you know, level get what you get. That's it. Get what you get. That's what level everybody's starting on when they get into a relationship and they have no awareness of the self. It's like a crap shoot. So, boom. So you have two people. The norm is to have two people get into a relationship and they both don't know who the fuck they are, what's going on, that they are, or even that even exists. So you want to expedite that process. If you're the establishment, you want to keep that going. So what do? They put out social media relationship apps like Tinder and Matched and eHarmony and all that other stuff to expedite the process of ignorance in relationships and expedite the process of shallow thinking. So emotions are based upon physical attractiveness. Basically, that's it. On the mainstream level. And even beyond that, like a lot of the people, like you can't really say your relationship is not physical based if you yourself is largely like physical based. Like then this is the thing. What happens is that people grow into it being not physically based, but this is what I'm talking about. In the moment. Like that, and obviously this is going to be the biggest attractor. I'm not saying that it's not supposed to happen. What I'm saying is that it doesn't happen like that for everybody else. That's just a fact. The physical nature, once you get to a certain point, like the physical nature of the individual, it's it's just, it's beyond secondary. Because the real love, like I said, an awareness is interchangeable with love. So is awareness, how deep is awareness in the physical, like you see her and she sees you? How deep is the awareness there? The awareness is just in the physical nature of the eyes. So is your love about the eyes, or is it about what that individual represents once they're in your life for a certain amount of time? You don't know who that person is other than what your eyes see and what your body feels. So your eyes see something, makes your body go, your dick gets hard, your vagina gets moist, or whatever it is. You know, oh, we're in love, and then boom. You have a baby. That's your evidence of God. Now you've done your mission here. Is it that simple for most people who are in that mainstream consciousness? It is. That's the status quo. It's like do this, and then you'll be successful. So let's go back to the relationships, the awareness. The awareness, for the most part, is not there when you have people who are locked in that world. So you can't really get into a macro relationship with anybody if they don't have the awareness of self. A lot of people don't even have a sense of self to get to that point. So this is why a lot of people who are on that journey really don't get into any relationships, is because the deeper you go into the self, the deeper you get away from other people, because other people are, a lot of people are heavily vested in expanding their version of the self to make themselves synthetically appear and seem more like God, like to deal with the situation of having an establishment that places itself as your God. So all the concessions that we have, all the big nature, the big gangsters that are out there, all that shit is designed. It's a side effect to having your entire universe stolen from you from the inside out. So the outside you has to seem big and bold and all that other stuff. This is the childhood nature of the establishment itself. So we've adopted those emotion-based perspectives into the way we perceive our reality and our relationships and all the stuff that's around that whole world. And largely that work doesn't get done because our lives get consumed by the day-to-day basis. And then you have your evidence of God that you have to take care of. That's your responsibility. Let's say you have 4 or 5 evidences of God. Maybe you have 10 evidences of God. And now what? Well, you have to pay that evidence of God establishment in order to pay, feed those evidences of God. So who's your real God? The the babies who gave you your evidence, or the one you don't see that created your evidence of God, or is it the establishment that feeds your evidence of God, the establishment that educates your evidence of God? Is it the police department that protects your evidence of God? Is that's your real God? The political establishment that creates the Constitution for the freedoms of your evidence of God, they become more godly than God. So this is how this establishment becomes more important than your relationship to yourself, in the sense of your relationship to the Most High, and definitely your relationship to others, and so on and so forth. Everything becomes filtered through. You can't get married without the government. You can't get your food without the government. You can't do this. You can't do that. Your basic human resources, all of it in some kind of way is dealing with the filter of that establishment. And the New Agers and all that other people, their only way to deal with that is to escape it, because it's just a belief system to them. They think the political scene is just a belief system that people are maintaining that is their own enslavement. Is that untrue? I can't really say it's untrue, because that's really a loose, like a fake ass example of a write up of how deep this storyline is. It's way more complex than that. But for the most part, a lot of people are in that space and they don't really want to go any further than that. That's it. That's enough for them. So the same way people are like accepting that the word, or that billboard of evidence of God, they're like, yep, that's evidence of God. Now I am godly. So relationships, I'll get back to that. Okay, so back to the awareness. So the awareness of yourself is going to affect the awareness of your relationship. You can't have a loving relationship if you're not aware of your partner. If you're not aware of your actions interacting with your partner, then you don't really have a deep love either. So how deep can somebody who has never really experienced what you're experiencing, how deeply can they love you? That's the swirling discussion. It's no further than that. And the answer to that is they can only love you as much as sympathy gets close to empathy. As close as sympathy gets close to empathy, that's how much somebody who's never been through the same things, based upon the way the establishment has designed this system, they can't really truly get to a loving space with you on an empathic relationship, on a sensitivity that's based upon empathy, not sympathy. See, and people who know what I'm talking about right now, who are open to that, not emotion-based. Emotion-based people want to say that, all these people can have these relationships. Yeah, you can have a relationship, obviously. You can have a loving relationship. But this is what I'm saying. This is the macro. I don't think you can have a loving relationship. This is what I'm saying. You can have a loving relationship based upon your definition of love. You can have a loving relationship based upon your definition of love with other people from other races. What I'm saying is that your definition of love will become, your awareness of the definition of love becomes a lot deeper once you start to become more aware of yourself and the system, because the system itself is also a part of your relationship. Your relationship with each other is the relationship that you have with the establishment is part of your relationship with each other. So this is how the macro is involved in your relationship. So this is an example right here. And it's very loose because I was younger, she was younger, that whole thing. But in the Occupy movement, I was dating a woman. It was a real quick relationship. Can't even really say dating. We were just kind of hanging out for a little while. I met her in Occupy. She was a white woman, and it was just like I didn't really feel anything other than like the baseline, sort of like the old relationship stuff. Attractive, sort of that thing to me at that time, that whole thing. So an example was my heart was really in like Occupy. Even though I wasn't completely out there like camping, and then that was the thing, that wasn't a requirement. It was just like, if you're providing a service, if you're helping, then everybody's welcome. And some people camp, some people don't, because it wasn't about that. It was about the what you were talking about. So that's what I was about. I was like, it's what about what I'm about. So I still had my apartment, so I would spend my days out there in San Francisco, and then when Oakland popped off, I was in Oakland. And then I would go back and forth, and then I started this woman was with me the whole time. Not the whole time, but every now and again when she wasn't working. And one night we were hanging out at night, and we were getting ready to crash out, and I got a text message from somebody down at Occupy, and it wasn't it wasn't really important. It was like an emergency or anything. It was just like, hey, you know, this stuff is going down. We're doing this. And I was like, I could talk about that tomorrow, but I could get down there now because it could get worse. It could be like a thing. So it's kind of like an in-between sort of thing. Could I get there now? Do I need to be there now? Or can I wait till tomorrow? In everything in me, I was like, damn, I got to get there right now. And I should go down there. And that's where I was. On her end, she was all about like, don't go down there, and actually you should be pulling away from this Occupy stuff. And it was more like a thing for her. It was an event. It was something. Whereas to me, you can see in the way she was discussing this thing, and you know, and you can take it however you want, but this, I'm just expanding it so you can see how the difference of approach are. You have people that protest with signs, and then you have people who protest with their hearts, and that's a difference. That's the difference of the difference between the micro and the macro. People like her, they might have had the intentions of protesting with their heart, but their approach, their awareness of the revolution, their awareness of whatever they're dealing with, is maxing out at a belief system. It's not really in the heart. It's just a thing to do. And whereas for me, this wasn't a protest. This was like a thought. Like, this was a consciousness of the masses. This is what this represented. And I saw in that moment, as we were like fixing the bed to crash out for the night, I saw in that moment the difference between us. And that was like my last kind of like old relationship. Like, it was just like old style, old thinking, to where I didn't really have an awareness of myself. So this goes into like what I was saying before, the difference between sympathy and empathy in relationships. So this is what happens. Like, a part of you has to get lost. A part of you have to drop a part of yourself to get into a relationship with somebody who doesn't have any kind of awareness, let alone concern, or even idea that it needs to be aware, and it needs to have an awareness. So if people are going against the awareness, you're in a relationship with somebody like that, it's not going to go too far. It's only going to go to the extent of the consciousness of that individual. So what is your love? What is your, this is what I'm talking about in reference to in reference to the macro. So like I said, your awareness is actually what presupposes your love. The definition of your love, your definition of awareness, is what sets up your relationship, your definition of love. So the awareness of yourself is involved in the awareness of the inner, the outer, and the other's inner and outer, and also the macro world that affects both you and her, or whoever it is that's out there. So for the most part, so-called white people generally not only don't have any concern with any of that information, they are actively, for the most part, going against you even bringing up that topic, bringing up that discussion. And for the most part, on the whole, their entire so-called race is vested in you not looking at that information, in you not unveiling that information, in you not having that awareness. So for the most part, a white woman's relationship is heavily vested in the black man's lack of awareness of the storyline, the relationship between her ancestors and his ancestors, and what's going on right now as a result of those relationships. Like their relationship, her safety net is largely vested in the ignorance of that man. That's how, and the world, the colonial world has designed itself to maintain that ignorance, and that maintenance is vested in the very relationships that are being promoted by the system when they promote the interracial relationships, when they promote we're all one, all that stuff. All that stuff is out there to boil up your emotions and boil up all that, that sympathy. Oh, we're all love, but they never get into the empathy. You're never supposed to truly feel anything. You're supposed to be emotional. So this is a thing. This is a good way to lay it out, and it's just kind of a loose way to put it out there. But you can feel the difference in the way, because like I said, there's nothing wrong with emotions, but there's a difference between feeling a certain thing. There's more awareness in a feeling than there is in an emotion. This is what I'm saying is awareness is the encompassing thing, where you have to be aware of your feelings and aware of your emotions. Feelings, for the most part, how I'm defining it, feelings are a natural occurrence that if you have an awareness, then you can understand what those understand and understand what those feelings are. It's just loose information. It's just kind of like bare bones sort of thing that's going on. It's a feeling. It's natural. What happens is that when you put attachments onto those feelings, when you put false definitions or bullshit onto those feelings, that's when feelings turn into emotions, and emotions start to take on a different sort of thing, and then they can overtake what your feelings even mean anymore. So this is where largely people are locked into the emotion-based thinking, and they don't really have any feelings anymore. They can't feel anything anymore. And a lot of the reasons why people can't feel anything anymore is because people aren't thinking. They don't have any way to think themselves out of the emotions. They can't really comprehend what's going on in their emotion-based thinking, and they can't really understand, overstand, or even comprehend another way of interpreting their emotions from a lighter way of a lighter approach. They can't comprehend that, because the system itself, the macro system itself, that's the status quo. It's taboo to think, act, and feel anything other than the way the system is telling you to think, act, and feel. So when you start doing that, you become a threat. When you become a threat to the system or the establishment, you also become a threat to people who are heavily vested in that establishment. So you can't have relationships with people who are still invested with the establishment with inside them. It's just not going to happen, because you attacking the establishment is you attacking part of them. So this is why it's so threatening. Like you can't even you can't have discussions, you can't have conversations with people, regular conversations with people, because their discussions are, you're speaking a different language. You're speaking empathy-based language. They're speaking sympathy-based language. See, when you're speaking a sympathy-based language, it's separate. It's different. It's you over here, them over there, and you can't bridge that gap. There's no way. So all they can do is say, "Oh, I'm sorry. It's okay. Like, you'll be okay, and we're different. I'm not that person now that my ancestors were back then. We're just all one now." And you're like, "Go fuck yourself," and then you're out of there. So like that's what's happening, because and when you're talking to somebody else like that, see, that discussion doesn't even get made when you have people who are empathy-based relationships. You're automatically like, you're there, like you're already there. It's like, we got it, we understand, boom, you're already there. Whereas this whole, like, you have to have this discussion, and then you're, after a while, you're hoping that sympathy can take the place of empathy over a while. And I just use those words as an example of like the gap. I just use those words as the gap that can't be closed between people, especially if this establishment, like the macro discussion, isn't even being made. Like that gap will never be closed. And anyway, I'm not gonna go into that. That's a whole different thing. So that's basically it. That's the depth of the relationships, and the beginning, the introduction of like how the macro fits into relationships. Because a lot of people have that question. They have like, oh, what is this interracial relationships? You know, what do you think about this and all that other stuff? Yeah, so it's not as simple as, you know, people make it out to be. It's actually way more complex than that. So let me see, let me close this out. So the evidence of life, baby picture, Jesus billboard. Okay, so that ties into like so that fake love, that sympathy love, that sympathy relationship, that sympathy connection next to empathy, depths of relationship, intertwining, mingle, connections, all that other stuff. That's being, that wants to be completely washed over by this coexist bumper sticker revolution mentality. So you understand, you've seen those coexist bumper stickers. What that's white people saying, everything's the same, we should just coexist. And so you think like, wait a second, what about the intricacies of all the details in those symbols that you just fucking loosely slapped on a bumper sticker to just kill all the shit that we've been talking about? What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, see how disrespectful that is? Coexist. And then, like, we're like, wait a second, what? How the fuck could you just say that? Like, what about what we think about all those other, you know, religions and thought processes? And first of all, the majority of all those symbols that you use are connected with religions that are fucked in the head in the first place. So what are you fucking talking about? Like, what do you mean coexist? And who made you in charge of all this shit that we're talking about? You see that T is right in there, right? That cross, that T. So this is why this is how those that that sympathy based or that lack of awareness based consciousness is trying to make gods out of itself by taking the godliness of you and then putting it into its own world and then saying, this is what it is. And then we're like, wait a second, what about all the shit that we've been talking about before your ass even showed up here? Oh, it's the same. We're talking about the same thing. It's the same God. It's the same thing. It's the same. Come on, it's the same. It's like, wait a second. You motherfuckers you ain't even fucking completed kindergarten yet. Your belief systems, your intellect, your religions, your relationships, your culture, your so-called civilization, it hasn't even gotten out of kindergarten yet. And you motherfuckers want to say that it's equal to what we've already done? What our ancestors have already completed? What they left all these images to remind us of? You just want to say that just because you can make a coexist bumper sticker that everything's the same? Get the fuck out of here. That's bullshit. So all these new agers out there are doing the same thing that Flat Earth did with the Flat Earth shit. With the flat when people in Flat Earth came up on Flat Earth, it was all about flat versus globe, the science and all that other shit. But then they started running into these ancestral interpretations of the cosmology. And then they started to see all these little symbols around, like the Mayan cosmology and the symbols around the Inca cosmology and the Egyptian cosmology and like all these different cosmologies around. They saw these symbols and said, oh no, we need to just, that's gonna cause too much trouble. It's gonna too much information involved in that. We need to just focus on the flatness. So what they did was they said, fuck all those symbols, the same way that bumper sticker said, fuck all those symbols, fuck all that information. Let's just focus on how it's all just plain, plain Jane, just mayonnaise sandwich as version of spirituality, mayonnaise version of cosmology. Everything's the same. Like, wait a second. It's not the same because you motherfuckers are not understanding what these symbols mean, what the information, what the essence of that shit means. You assholes just want to focus on the flatness of the picture, like kindergarten, that you haven't even gotten out of kindergarten yet. So instead of going into what that means on that depth of connection, people are priding themselves on a fake depth of connection. This is that shallow, this is like the flat versus globe. People priding themselves on, being flat earthers. Just why? Because there's globe earthers out there? Motherfucker, you was just a globe earther a few weeks ago. How are you different than them? So instead of finding out ways to help them not fall into that trap of pride and ego and all that bullshit once you get into flat earth, what people do is they created this whole community based upon that pride and that ego. And then it stops there. So how is the flat earth community actually any different than what Mark and Patricia did with that Netflix documentary? It is not. It's not. It's the same. It's all for fucking show and attention and all that other stuff if you're not talking about the macro. If you're not going into how and why this shit works, you're only talking about what and who. And it's the same discussion. It's for nothing. So it's the same thing with like relationships. Like if you're not going into the relationships of the macro, then you're only going into the relationships what? For your own personal gain, for your own personal benefit. And that's why I'm saying the relationships need to be, if you're really talking about the depths of a loving macro relationship, you have to take into account the macro storyline. And the macro storyline is not devoid of what's going on with race and not like, oh, let's just coexist like that bumper sticker shit. No, it's largely aware of it. It's connected. It's meeting each other on that level and being like, hey, you know what I know. You've experienced what I've experienced. We are here to get through this shit. Like, see, this is another thing, part of that relationship stuff. We're not allowed to share our experiences for the most part with people who are still vested in that world. See, you have to have a strong individual to even comprehend a lot of this stuff, especially if they come from the race of the ancestors who did that shit, like who are still like, and that, it's not a lot of strength, it's not a lot of strong people out there. So they not only cannot even look at that stuff, they can't even fucking do anything with it. So in order to hurry up and get out, there's a lot of guilt there. So a lot of people jump straight into relationships, in interracial relationships, a lot of the times to run away from that work, to run away from that guilt, to run away from that, to cloud it, to hide it. So you see politicians who date, you know, people outside of their race for political scenes. It's the same shit. So people do this shit subconsciously. Yeah, so what else is there? That's pretty much it. You can see how relationships and love and all that is inside the politics. It's inside your relationships. And that's where the macro fits in with your personal relationships. So I'll leave it there. There's some. This is like I said. This is basically like the introduction. It's all over the place. I can spend another hour just focusing on one of these things, but for the most part, this video is just the intro to the relationships, the macro discussion with relationships, and so on and so forth. To go a step even further. So if you got any questions or anything to bring up, leave it in the comments. Thank you again for the support. And until next time, from all my relations. Peace, love, and harmony.